Hello, this is the Ensoniq SQ-80. It was actually made by the people who did the Commodore 64 and the Commodore 16. They created the Ensoniq keyboard, which is nice. Now the problem with this is the internal battery has died, and I've got to replace that because you create a nice sound, then as soon as you switch it off and switch it back on again, it's lost and you're back to zero again. So I'll show you how easy it is to replace that. I can save the sounds onto a floppy disk, but I don't really want floppy disks all over the place. These are not actually reliable after, what, 37 years or something since this came out. So it's still working, but it's a bit noisy and clunky. The great thing with these keyboards, however, which is what I think is worth getting hold of them if you can, is they have the polyphonic aftertouch. Now, what that is when you press a load of keys and you give a bit of pressure, you can change modulation or filter or whatever in there. However, with these, you can sort of press a chord down, and then you can just a bit more effort on the top one or the bottom one or whatever, and you can do nice interesting things with the sounds. So when you switch this thing on, it'll say calibrating keyboard, do not touch keys. I'll explain why in a second. But the warning, battery voltage is low, so it's asking you to save everything, of course. Another wonderful thing about this, which I think is great, is the keys. There are no contacts. There's no buttons under there. There's no rubber plungers to clean or anything. There's actually no electrical connection between the actual keys and the synthesizer. And the way that works, if you imagine there's a coil that's actually printed underneath every single key on a circuit board, and the key has a piece of metal. And as the metal comes down towards the coil, it changes the inductance, and that's how the synthesizer knows which key you've just pressed. Now, when you add a bit more pressure to any of the keys, you're pushing it a little bit further towards that coil, therefore changing the inductance, and therefore the synthesizer knows exactly which key you're adding the pressure to. So there's no physical contact under there. And that's why every time you actually switch the synthesizer on, it calibrates the keyboard. You can't touch any of the keys because it's measuring the inductance underneath every single key. And the great thing about that is they never break. They never get dirty. You never have to clean contacts. You never have to change the rubber plungers or anything. One of the downsides to this keyboard is it's very clunky. So there's little bits of sponge stuck on the bottom of each key, and they sort of get hard over time. But on the website Synthesizer, they actually sell a little kit of little rubber bushings that you can put underneath all the keys and stop all that clunkiness again. Anyway, let's get on with the simple fix. This fix can be done to most keyboards that take a 3-volt battery. So I'll show you how easy it is to do this one. So switch off the keyboard, unplug all the connectors. So there's nothing plugged in there at all, and you've just got 4 hex screws up here, Allen keys or whatever it's called in your country. Now you just undo these 4. Now this lid is hinged along the back here, and what you have to do when you've unscrewed those 4 screws, you just sort of catch the lid, and it feels a bit tight and you may feel you're going to break something, but don't worry about that. Just grab it and you'll hear a thud. There you go. Just a little bit more and it comes up. Don't worry, it's a bit scary because you think you're going to break something there, but it's just the way these screws are on these plastic lugs, and they fit quite perfectly into these ends here, and it's a bit tight to get it up. So inside, let's have a look. The battery is here underneath this metal plate, so you've got to unscrew this plate. And for some reason, I've got a screw missing already there. So it's 6 screws there, and then this cabling is sort of in the way as well. So you've got to unplug all these little plugs here. Don't worry, they can only go in one way round, so you're not going to put it in the wrong way when you pull them up. They're a little bit awkward to pull, but 1, 2, 3. That one's fine. Don't worry about this long ribbon cable. If we can get the actual metal plate off that way, you may have to cut these little cable ties here. Be careful not to cut through the actual cable, of course. Just lift that piece out. And then this piece should come up and slide backwards like so. So we'll take that out. So there's the battery that you need to replace, and I think they're about 10 to 20 pounds, which, you know, for 37 years of use, considering that's probably the original, I think it's done pretty well. So I'm just going to mark on the board here, just a positive sign, so I know which way round it is when I cut it off. I'm not going to bother unsoldering it from the board. I'm just going to literally snip it off and then solder 2 new wires directly onto the board, and then put the CR2032 into this little holder. And I don't know, I might sort of place it up there so that in the future you can just open the lid, pop it off, change the battery, put the lid back down, possibly. Because if I put it underneath there, then it's going to be underneath the metal plate, and you're still going to have to be unscrewing and taking everything apart. Though it's not a difficult job. You know, it's probably be neater down there actually if I solder one end in and a little bit of an extension cable to the other side, because obviously it's shorter. But I'll consider what to do. But firstly, I'm just going to check that battery just to make sure. Actually, can you see it on the screen? Right. So let's see, positive that side. So this should be 3 volts. 0.5, yeah, only 1/6 of what it used to be. So yeah, definitely needs changing. Okay, so I'm going to prepare this, put 2 wires on it, and then I shall snip that off, solder this into place. So these holders are really cheap to buy, and I think I bought 10 for just a few pounds. And the actual batteries, CR2032's, Panasonic's, it's a Panasonic we're taking out of the keyboard anyway, so reasonably good quality batteries. Again, 8 of those for £1 UK, not bad at all. Now you've got to look for the positive sign on the battery, and that's the large part of the battery. It wraps all the way around the side as well. So this is the negative side. So if you put that into the battery holder, this edge piece here, which is touching the side, is the positive. So we need to put the red wire on that side. Just make sure you get it the right way round. The amount of times I've soldered a wire and haven't put the heat shrink on, and you have to unsolder it again to put the heat shrink on. Hundreds of times, I reckon. So just solder that into place. That's a good solid connection. Excellent. Right, there you go. That's the piece all nicely made up. So I've put a little bit of the sort of tubing over the wire here, because what I'm going to do, I'm going to solder that in there and just have this coming up out of the hole. There's a little gap here on the metalwork, and that'll protect this from rubbing against the metal, hopefully. And okay, this is going to sort of flap around in the breeze, but by the time I put these cables down, I'll just sort of wedge it down with the battery in it. I know it's not a professional job, but it's my keyboard. It's not like I'm fixing this for somebody else. It's just something that's irritating me every time I make a sound and I've lost it again. You can't actually bend these wires out. I would have liked to have made it a bit more flat, but I tried to bend one of the wires and they just snap off. It's that sort of crusty metal. As soon as you bend it, it snaps. So yeah, you've got to go in at this sort of angle and not bend those around. So yeah, I'm going to put that on there, solder it into place, put the metal lid on, and then I've got to put some cable ties down for this. So I'll just tie that down to the rest of the thing, put a battery in there and see what the display tells me. And then in 3 to 5 years time, when it needs changing, I just have to undo the 4 screws and change the battery. Don't have to bother unplugging everything and taking all the metal work up and whatever. So I'm going to snip this battery off, and I'm going to leave a bit of the metal sort of sticking up so I can solder to that. There you go. And that's the proper battery. If you want to put the proper battery in, it's a BR 2/3 A or 2/3A 3-volt Panasonic. 1987? I don't know. Maybe that means 1987. I mean, if I was doing this job professionally for somebody, I'd buy the actual battery. But then to do the battery, you've got to take all the board and everything up to solder underneath the board and things. And for my own job, I'm not really that fussed, as long as it works. So this way, I'm just going to solder it directly to the bits of pin that were left sticking up from the old battery. Is that on? Yes, nice. And the positive goes on that arm. I could have just unplugged this big long cable, of course, but there's no point. So I want that to come up that hole there. Now, I mentioned in one of my previous videos, when you're putting these sort of screws back into these holes, or especially those plastic posts, don't just put the screw in and screw it down and force it in. You should always put the screw in and turn it anti-clockwise until it clicks. And then when you screw it in, it goes into the same thread that was already cut for it earlier. If you're going into these plastic posts, see, these are going into plastic underneath there. If you just sort of force it in, you'll be biting a new thread into the plastic. And that's why you sometimes get those plastic posts and the screws just don't fit in them anymore. They just keep falling out. It's because you've unscrewed them and screwed them back in several times and killed the plastic, basically. Killed the thread, rather. So yeah, just go back and you'll hear it click as it drops into its original thread, and then just screw it down. So yeah, now we've got this thing flapping around in the breeze, but it's not the end of the world because it's sitting on here, so it's not going to touch the metal, and there's actually quite a bit of space underneath here when you close the lid, so that's not going to affect that. And if I put a little cable tie on there, it'll sort of stay in place. I know it looks like a little bit of a bodge, but like I say, it's my keyboard, doesn't matter. I'll just get some cable ties and cable tie these back down again. So yeah, this thing now is flapping around in the breeze, but it doesn't matter, don't worry. If I just put one little cable tie in there to hold it in that area, there's enough room for it to just sit there with its battery in there. The battery won't fall out. It's not going to be touching any of the casing. And when the lid closes, there's this sort of cardboard protection in the way as well. So now, put a nice new battery in, close the lid, fire it up and see what happens. I might have to reset its memory, not too sure. Let's see what happens. Nice brand new battery. Should I test it first? Yeah. Let's test it. Being as they were so incredibly cheap. Oh, look at that, 3.3 volts. Das ist wunderbar. Okay. Oops. Shove it in that way. Oh. Ah, there you go. It's clipped into place. Now, hopefully, let me have a look. Oh yeah, there's loads of room in there. Now when you close these, again, you've got to get over that sort of weird sort of snapping sound. So if you kind of grip it about there and give it a little bit of force, clunk, it snaps into place. So let's power it up and see if it says battery. It might have lost its memory, but let's have a look. It'll calibrate the keyboard. Let's zoom into the display for you. Calibrating. There you go. It skipped the part where it's warning me about the battery. Brilliant. So that's working. So in 3 to 5 years, maybe, when that battery needs changing again, it's going to be very easy because it's just 4 screws, lift the lid, pop the battery out, put the new one in, close the lid, done. None of that taking all the metalwork out and soldering onto the board and things anymore. Don't have to do that. I know it's not the right battery. I understand that before you start writing that in the comments, but it won't make any difference. It's a 3-volt lithium battery, so chances are it's not going to leak or anything. There you go. Job's fixed. Job's a good one. Nice and simple. Don't have to buy those expensive batteries anymore. Let's have a look. Luckily, it's just sitting in its own sort of factory reset state, which is what it's been doing for a while anyway. Every time you turn it on, you do something, you go back to it another day, and it's at its initial setup all over again. So sounds nice. So let me try and find something to just demonstrate this. Let me have a look. I've got to find a sound. Is it the ooze? I'll just demonstrate this poly aftertouch, which is what is great about this keyboard. Bit of pressure to the bottom note, to the top note. So you can affect them all differently, play a nice chord and sort of make all this movement with it and things, which is great. And the other thing with this as well is that it actually transmits out of the MIDI all the polyphonic aftertouch as well. So if you've got keyboards that will accept polyphonic aftertouch but only have normal keyboards, you can use this as a kind of a master keyboard and get a lot more out of a synthesizer just by using this as just a slave synthesizer if you wish. But yeah, that's it really. It wasn't really the greatest repair, I understand, but I just thought I hadn't done a video for such a long time because of all this lockdown, etc. I haven't been able to get my hands on anything to do any repairs. I decided I will have a dig around and, you know, do something just to try and get back into the habit of getting into making videos again. So I do apologise for that if you haven't seen any for quite a long while from me. But it's all this crazy lockdown. It stopped me finding things to actually do. Anyhow, I hope you like that. If you did, please give us a thumbs up. If you didn't, give us a thumbs down. Entirely up to you. All the best. Thanks very much for watching.